All right, picture this. It's 1954. The world is still just picking up the pieces from two devastating world wars. And now there's this brand new terror, the atomic bomb. It's in this moment that the philosopher Albert Schweitzer steps up and gives one of the most incredible Nobel lectures of all time. So today on The Explainer, we're going to break down his diagnosis of why our attempts at peace keep failing and what he thought it would really take to get it right.
We are becoming inhuman to the extent that we become supermen. Wow, let that sink in for a second. This one sentence, this is the absolute heart of Schweitzer's warning. What he's saying is, our technology, our power, it's growing at this insane speed, but our wisdom, our ethics, they're just not keeping up. And that creates this incredibly dangerous gap, a gap that you could argue is even wider and scarier today. So let's get into his first point. A timeless problem, why our peace fails. Now, you'd think he'd start with the atomic bomb, right? The big new threat? But no, he actually starts by looking at the very things that were supposed to stop wars, the peace treaties. He took a hard look at the peace deals made after the big wars of the 20th century and basically said, you guys, this was never gonna work. Okay, so he breaks it down into two totally different kinds of peace. On one hand, you've got what he calls a peace of victory. Think of it like this. The winner just forces their will on the loser. It completely ignores history, it doesn't care about the economic reality, and all it really does is create a ton of anger and resentment. Then there's the peace of justice. This is the one that actually tries to find real, objective solutions that can last because they respect the facts on the ground. And Schweitzer's point was simple. We almost always go for the first one, and in doing so, we're basically just planting the seeds for the next war. And this isn't just theory, right? These are the real-world results of those bad peace deals. You get borders drawn in ways that make no sense, maybe cutting a port city off from all the farmland that supports it. You create countries that are just set up to fail. But for Schweitzer, the absolute worst-case scenario, the most flagrant violation, was something he saw with his own eyes after World War II, forcibly ripping hundreds of thousands of people from their homes and their land. It was a level of inhumanity he just couldn't stomach. All right, section 2, man becomes Superman, and the changing nature of war. Flawed treaties were bad enough, but Schweitzer saw something else going on, something much, much deeper, and honestly, a lot more terrifying. He realized it wasn't just about politics anymore. The very nature of our power as a species, and because of that, the nature of war itself, had changed forever. And you can actually trace this escalation, and it's pretty wild. For most of human history, our ability to cause harm was limited by our own bodies, how hard you could throw a spear or pull back a bow. Then, boom, gunpowder comes along, and suddenly we're using chemical energy. It's a big jump, but the jump to the atomic bomb, that was something else entirely. We weren't just using chemicals, we were unlocking the fundamental forces of the universe. And that's when, in his words, man became Superman. And this brings us right to what he called the Superman dilemma. And it's a huge one. We've got this godlike, superhuman power, the ability to literally wipe ourselves off the map. But, and this is the fatal flaw, we haven't developed the superhuman reason to go along with it. Our power shot up like a rocket, but our wisdom, our ethical compass, is still lagging way, way behind. So what's the consequence of this massive gap? We get used to it. We become numb. We hear that millions of people have been killed, entire cities have been vaporized, that people are being turned into, and I'm quoting here, living torches, and we just kind of process it. We chalk it up as a win or a loss for our team. And Schweitzer's point is that the moment we start to accept these things as just the normal cost of war, we've all become guilty of being inhuman. Part 3, why institutions aren't enough, the limits of law. Okay, so if the situation is that dire, there's a pretty natural question that comes up, right? What about our big global institutions? Surely they can stop this from happening. Yeah, so can't organizations like the United Nations prevent war? Schweitzer tackled this hope directly. And remember, he had a front row seat. He'd already watched the League of Nations fail, and now he was watching the brand new UN get started. And frankly, he was not convinced they were the answer. His argument was that these organizations are, at their core, legal bodies. They can do some really important stuff, don't get me wrong. They can provide aid, they can help mediate, they can write up all the documents. But the one thing they can't do is create the actual will for peace in the first place. They're a tool that only works if people already want peace. And back then, he looked around and just didn't see that spirit anywhere.
So for Schweitzer, the foundation of peace is kind of like a building. You've got legal institutions, but that's a shaky pillar. Their impact is pretty limited. Then you have the will of the people in each nation, but that's unstable too. It can be swayed by emotion, by nationalism. He said the only thing that can serve as a true solid foundation, the bedrock for everything else, is a shared ethical spirit. Without that solid base, the other two are always going to crumble. Okay, Section 4, the ethical solution, a revolution of the spirit. So if treaties don't work and we're too powerful for our own good, and even the UN can't save us, then what's left? What is the answer? Well, Schweitzer's solution isn't political, it's not legal. It's something way more personal and way more profound. He said the only way out is a total revolution, a revolution of the spirit. The only thing that can possibly control our superhuman power is a kind of superior ethical reason. And you don't get that by changing governments or passing new laws. It has to be a fundamental shift inside every single one of us, a rebirth of what it means to be humane. But here's the really crucial part. He didn't think this was some impossible task. This spirit of compassion, what he famously called reverence for life, he said it's not something we have to go out and invent. It's already in there. It lives inside every single person. It's part of our basic nature. We just have to find it again, dust it off, and let it take the lead. All right, our final section, the first step, from idea to action. And this is so important because this isn't just some nice, fuzzy, philosophical idea. Schweitzer was a doer, right? He built hospitals. So he didn't end his speech with an idea. He ended it with a very real, very tangible first step that he challenged the whole world to take. And he laid out a super clear 3-step plan for building a real peace. And check out where it starts. Step 1 isn't negotiations. It's not treaties. It's atonement. He said peoples have to actually atone for the wrongs they've done to each other. Because he argued, that's how you get to step 2, confidence. That act of atonement creates the trust, the capital as he calls it, that you need to do any real work. And only then, once you have that trust, can you move to step 3, actually trying to find fair and lasting settlements. This was his big plea to the world. And notice, he's not begging governments here. He's begging the peoples of the world. He's saying, look, we have to get off these old highways of nationalism and military victory because we know exactly where they lead, right back to another war. It's time, he said, to take that first hard step onto a totally new road. And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Here we are 70 years later, and we are absolutely still staring down that same Superman dilemma. Unbelievable power, but maybe not enough wisdom. So we have to ask ourselves, have we even taken that first step onto the new highway Schweitzer pointed out? Or are we just driving down the same old roads, heading for the same old destination?